Now what? Congratulations, class of 2021. You have been through some of the most arduous challenges any generation has faced in living memory. What should have been some of the best years of your young lives have been stolen by the pandemic. And yet you stood firm and you adapted to the challenges you faced with grace and courage beyond your years. Well done for all that you have achieved. My name is Bongani Bingwa and I'm a broadcast journalist. I'm the host of 702 Breakfast and I'm also a presenter on Carte Blanche. I'm here to share with you some lessons I have learned the hard way in life. You will have your own, but hopefully, if my words find any resonance with you, you can avoid some of mine. I'm going to do this with you through quotes that I live by, quotes that guide me on a daily basis. Hell, in my opinion, is never finding your true self and never living your own life knowing who you are. The words there of John Bradshaw. I have a painting in my home. It's the first thing that you see when you come through the front door. And I can never not see it. As I come home, it's there. And as I leave, as I close the door, it's the last thing that I see. It's a painting by the modern artist, Zimbabwean-born Matric. And it's a painting of two women. They're walking together. One has a calabash on her head and the other carries what appear to be logs, perhaps for firewood. And she also has a baby on her back. And they're walking hand in hand, closely together, almost as if they're sisters, almost touching in a kind of sharing. Their lives may appear to be difficult to me, but they seem to be carrying them with grace and with ease. I always imagine my grandmother being one of these women. She was a semi-literate rural woman. And I imagine that she would have undertaken many such trips, walking down to the river to fetch water, to go and gather firewood, to start a fire, to cook the evening meal. My mother tells me how industrious she was and how she grew all kinds of vegetables, from beans to mealies, selling them to make ends meet, to feed a family so she could raise them after her husband abandoned the family and got swallowed up by the migrant labor system, only to return years later to come home basically to die. Such was their struggle that my mother tells me the very first pair of shoes she ever received, she was in what today would be grade 5 or grade 6. But the interesting thing about that story is that when she tells it, she says she couldn't hang on to these shoes, which were hand-me-downs. She couldn't hang on to them for very long because the other kids in the village started laughing at her. For them, this seemed an extravagance, if not an oddity, because none of them had their own pair of shoes. And so what did she do? She walked on the frost. She walked on the thorns. She walked on the earth because that was simply the way life had to be, because she didn't want to stand out. Could she have imagined that she'd be the first in her family to go to university? Could she have imagined that she'd be the first in her family to travel overseas? Could she have imagined that she would one day have a son like me doing what I do and talking to you in this way from the comfort of my home? And that's the point, isn't it? Everyone has a story. If you look hard enough, if you ask the right questions, it is there. Find your meaning in your own story. Your story is unique to you. Sure, other people may relate. There may even be similarities in terms of the journeys you have traveled together. But ultimately, only you know the textures of your life. Only you heard the words that were said, walked those footsteps, and only you know the feelings that have been evoked by different situations. Celebrate your story, but most importantly, own your story. Don't let anybody define who you are. All life is an experiment. The more experiments, the better. The words there of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I left high school convinced I was going to become a teacher. I was going to teach English and history, and so much changed in my years at university. By the time I left, I wanted to be a church minister. So I left to go and train to be an evangelist, and I spent 5 years of my adult life working as a full-time preacher. I'm now speaking to you, as I said earlier, as a broadcaster on radio and on television. So what have I learned in some of my detours? Well, you are going to be met with definitions of success. People are going to define that for you, whether it is in material terms or whether it is in spiritual senses. And in a way, I like to think of myself as still a teacher. Perhaps the only difference is that my classroom is a whole lot bigger than what I imagined it might be in 1993 when I matriculated. And so you're going to be met with questions and definitions of success. There are already, no doubt, expectations about what happens next in your journey, particularly if you've been a top achiever. There are expectations from those around you. There are expectations from yourself. Everybody wants you to do something with your life, to become somebody. So what are you good at? What are you passionate about? And how do you get skills in that area so that you can not only serve others and give back to others, but also find a way to look after yourself and those around you? The physical world ultimately is nothing more than a classroom. In the same way you've had to master school subjects, you've had to negotiate studying and perhaps even competition, manage teachers, meet the expectations of friends, your family, your community. In the same way you've had to deal with failure and success, manage those moments where you felt all alone, when you felt nobody could understand you. All of that is going to happen over and over and over again. There's going to be success, there's going to be joy, but there'll also be tears and disappointment. Use the lessons you've already learned to help you carry forward, because ultimately it is all an experiment. And you're fortunate in a sense because you live at a time and you're part of a generation that is no longer locked to one idea and the permanence of anything. You can reinvent yourself over and over and over and over again. The only thing I would urge you to think about is being true to who you are. Experiment, go with the flow, try new ideas. As long as your heart beats, you've got a chance to get up tomorrow. Rupi Kaur is a Canadian poet, and she's one of the people I most admire, purely because of the simplicity of how she sees life and how she explains the world. My favorite quote from her says, "If you were born with the weakness to fall, you were also born with the strength to get up." The strength, in other words, to succeed. What does that mean? The biggest lie I've ever seen is people allowing themselves to be defined by a single event. And here's the paradox. If you believe the lie, then it will come true. I've seen people unable to pick themselves up from a single event, from a single failure even. It could be a job they lost, perhaps the death of a loved one, or even a relationship that ended before they were ready. Equally, I have seen success define people and lead ultimately to their downfall. I've seen people defined by a job title or the money they earn or a project that went really, really, really great. Or worse even, a title they held, a position they held, and that became their life. And over and over and over again, I've seen it suck out their energy and suck out the joy from their lives. As you would expect, in my time, I've interviewed captains of industries, CEOs, ministers, celebrities, you name it. And ultimately, the thing that separates those who I think find this balance It's those people who are able to walk away from it and are not defined by what other people see, but are defined by who they see in themselves. Ultimately, it's about knowing you're on the right path. How do you know you're on the right path? I think it's when you're doing something that makes you feel like you're alive, when you're not disappearing, when you're not doing things that eat at your own self. When there isn't a departure point between who you want to be, who you believe yourself to be on the inside, and what other people see. When you make that mistake, there's absolutely no recovery from that. So don't be on any path that is about fitting in. There's a difference between fitting in and belonging. You're all about to go on an adventure, and don't ever lose sight of that. It is an adventure. No matter how low you go, no matter how high you get, it is an adventure. My parting shot would simply be this: always, always protect yourself. If you have an opportunity to protect yourself and you choose something else, you choose to listen to another voice, that is ultimately a betrayal of yourself. You will meet many people who will promise to protect you, to guide your path, to light your way. But the person who can do that more than anyone else is you. So seek meaning in the work that you do. Seek meaning and purpose in the path that you choose. Find the part of you that is drawn to hope. Find the part of you that even in the depths of hopelessness does not give in to despair. Because even when things go wrong, if that is the path you choose, you will always know you are true to yourself.